Ashiok Planeswalker Brawl Deck Tech. Hey everyone, it's VM Campos Magic Fan. I've got a new deck tech video for you. By popular demand, I've got a brand new Ashiok Planeswalker deck upgrade for you. Now this is a Brawl deck using Ashiok. Basically, I call it Oops All Ashiok. It's full of every Ashiok Planeswalker that exists. The commander or Brawlmander of the deck, of course, is an Ashiok Planeswalker. The deck is full of nightmares and a really cool way to wreck your opponent. So let's check out the deck. Check the description below to jump to the various chapters of the deck build. Let's check it out. Alright, so I've got my Arena account open right here. Now this deck, of course, can be made with plain old cards, but I'm going to go with my Arena account here to show you the deck. So I'm going to pull up the deck and show you the basics of how it's all put together and some strategy on making good Brawl decks. So Ashiok is one of my favorite Planeswalkers. They are a great nightmare Planeswalker that really messes with your opponent. And that's what this deck will do. It will let you mess with the opponent, do some really cool things, summon some nightmares, and just get too far ahead of the opponent. One of the sub-themes of this deck is milling your opponent out. Not in an extremely cruel way, but in a very nightmarish way. Okay, so this deck has all of the Ashiok Planeswalkers. Starting from the biggest one over here, let's say, we've got Ashiok Sculptor of Fears. This is the Planeswalker from the Theros Beyond Death Planeswalker decks, the one with Elspeth and Ashiok. So 6 mana, 4 loyalty, +2. You draw a card, period. Then, each player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. So you're going to be milling the opponent for 2, weakening them. You're going to be milling yourself for 2, strengthening yourself, because as we will see here. -5, put target creature card from any graveyard into the battlefield under your control. So if you happened to have milled an amazing creature from your opponent, you will be able to bring it with a -5 on the second turn. Beautiful. If you keep +2ing, -11. Gain control of all creatures target opponent's control. So whatever creatures they have on their side, now they come to your side if you can ultimate Ashiok Sculptor of Fears. Okay, next we have Ashiok Nightmare Muse. 5 mana, 5 loyalty, +1. Create a 2/3 blue and black nightmare creature token with, whenever this creature attacks or blocks, each opponent exiles the top 2 cards of the library. So with a +1, you're making a little creature that can block pretty well. It's a 2/3. Whenever it attacks, as soon as it attacks, even without being blocked or anything, as soon as it attacks, you mill 2 cards from the opponent's library. Put them into exile, actually, even better than milling, because it's in the exile zone, not in the graveyard zone. Okay, -3. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, then that player exiles a card from their hand. So, let's say they've got 1 card in hand, something on the field, you -3 that thing back to their hand, then they have to sacrifice something, they have to exile something that got bounced back to the hand. It's a great way to disrupt what's in their hand and what's on the battlefield. -7, which is not too hard to get to. You may cast up to 3 spells from among face-up cards that your opponents own from exile without paying their mana costs. So as you +1 Ashiok a few times and steal 4 to 6 cards off of their library, you will then be able to play them for free with that -7 ultimate. I've had opponents rage concede as soon as I start off that -7. Even if I barely get to 7 and -7 down to 0, they still rage concede because I'm just stealing a bunch of their cards right out of the exile zone that they can't even touch. And then the smallest Ashiok is actually the Brawlmander of this deck. This is the Ashiok that you have access to all the time as long as you've got the mana for it. The lowest casting cost Ashiok is here, Ashiok Dream Renderer. So for 3 mana, 1, and then Dimir hybrid mana. So you can summon this for either 1 black or 1 blue or 1 blue black. 3 mana total, 5 loyalty, with a static ability, so this is happening all the time. Spells and abilities your opponents control cannot cause their controller to search their library. So this shuts down any of their spells where they can go search for something, like an idyllic tutor. Nope, you can't go search for an artifact anymore. This also shuts down their Fabled Passage. Nope, you can't go search for a land. That ability is shut down. So it shuts down your opponent from searching for answers. -1. Target player puts the top 4 cards of their library into the graveyard, then exile the opponent's graveyard. Now, you could mill yourself for 4, but then you're still going to exile your opponent's library. It doesn't exile your own library. That's 2 separate things. Read the card carefully. So you could be milling yourself to put stuff into the graveyard to have your other Ashiok bring it back for a cheaper cost. Or you'll be, of course, milling your opponent for 4, getting them closer and closer to milling out. And again, I've won several times with this strategy as well here. Just mill them out 4 at a time. And because this is the lowest casting cost Ashiok as the Brawl Commander, even if they kill it, you'll be able to summon it again for 5 mana, right? The commander tax adds 2. So the first time you summon it for 3, the next time you summon it for 5, the next time for 7, for 9. I've been able to summon and resummon this Ashiok all the way up to, like, I think even like 9 or 11 mana because of the rest of the way this deck is built. So I have the lowest costing cast Ashiok here to lead the other Ashioks. Okay, so how do I keep resummoning the same commander? Okay, we're gonna need mana rocks and also mana fixing. So Arcane Signet, 2 mana rock. One of the biggest tips that I can give you to building good Brawl decks is to have a good mana base. That is the right lands, but also the right mana rocks or artifacts that produce mana. An auto-include in Brawl is the Arcane Signet. You've got to spend the 1 common wild card to get this right away. You don't get this from cracking packs. This is, you have to go use a wild card, and it's totally worth it. 2 mana, so right away on turn 2. Okay, turn 1 you drop a land, turn 2 you drop another land, then you play the Arcane Signet. That means when it's back to your turn, turn 3, you have 4 mana if you're able to drop 3 lands plus the Signet. You have 4 lands. You're further ahead than your opponent, who might only be up to 3 lands on their 3rd turn. You have 4 lands, 4 mana on your 4th turn, which then, if you keep going on curve, then you'll have 5 mana just in case your Ashiok is killed right away. You'll have the 5th mana to bring it back pretty fast. So definitely include the Arcane Signet. Then we've got the Dimir Locket. Okay, for 3 mana, you get an artifact that gives you either blue or black mana. So even if you don't drop the Signet on turn 2, you want to drop the Locket on turn 3. So again, you are accelerating faster than your opponent. Turn 3, you play the Locket. Turn 4, you've got 5 mana, faster than your opponent again. Then later on, when you don't need all that extra mana, pay 4 Dimir mana, tap it, sacrifice it, you draw 2 cards. Again, more cards, more good, less good for your opponent. And 1 more mana rock, the Chromatic Lantern. Same thing, it's a 3rd turn mana rock. This one, though, turns your lands into any color that you want. And there's an interesting trick here, because it says lands you control have add 1 mana of any color. That is in addition to what they normally have, which is kind of interesting and tricky, as we will see why in a moment. This itself also makes 1 mana of any color, so you won't be hurting for mana at all. You get flooded with black mana and you need blue mana. Once you've got the Chromatic Lantern out, all your lands tap for any color you want. All your lands, because watch this. Part of also getting a good mana base is, for example, tutoring for the right land. So let's say on your opening hand you've got double blue and no black. Well, you have a Fabled Passage in that hand, perhaps. Play it turn 1, sacrifice it, and then go search for that black mana that you're missing, that swamp. So it helps mana fix you. It also thins your deck. That's 1 less card in your deck to draw, 1 extra dead land to draw that you went to go get and put onto the battlefield right away. That's another good advice that I can give you in Brawl decks. You want to thin your deck to get to the cards that you need. So 1 card that replaces itself with another card so that there's less to draw will draw you to the better things. So this is this lets you go search for any land. If you search for it, when you have your 4th land, the land comes in untapped, which is very nice. That's why it's a rare card. The common version of this lets you go search for your land, but it comes into play tapped, so you would lose a turn with a tapped land. So Fabled Passage is better, but we want both of these mana-fixing lands that also help thin your deck. Now, if you've got the Chromatic Lantern, however, you don't even need to crack this to go get your other land. This will have the ability of tap it and sacrifice it to get a land, as well as tap it for a color of any mana that you want. So sometimes people don't realize that, but if you've got the Chromatic Lantern, it is adding the extra tap for any color ability. It's not replacing it, it's adding to it. So you don't have to even go search for that extra land, just tap this for the land that you want. Here's another part of the mana base, Command Tower. Again, this is very important. Crack this one as soon as possible with your wild card, because it'll tap to add any mana of your identity of your commander. This commander is blue and black, so it'll tap for any blue and black mana. It'll fix your mana perfectly. You've got a Watery Grave, also known as a shock land. It comes into play tapped unless you pay 2 life. Then it comes untapped and you can start using it right away for blue or black mana. And then we've got the Scry land. It comes into play tapped always, but as soon as it comes in, you get to scry. You get to look at the next card coming up. If you like it, leave it there. If you don't, put it at the bottom. And then after that, when it untaps, it taps for blue or black mana, so it's fixing the colors that you need. Castle Lothwain is a more utility land. It comes into play tapped unless you already have a swamp, a plain old swamp. So the Watery Grave would count as a swamp. It says right there, Island Swamp. But the Temple of Deceit doesn't. It's only a land. So be careful about that. If you put this Temple of Deceit out first and then try to put your Castle Lothwain second, it'll come in tapped. But if you put out the Watery Grave first and then the Castle Lothwain, it'll come in untapped because it does check for a swamp. So notice that's not a swamp. Neither is the Command Tower, and the Evolving Wilds and the Fabled Passage can let you go get that swamp or island, but not the temple, because it's not a basic land. Notice it says, go look for a basic land. Go look for a basic land. So these are the little subtle things that you need to be aware of with these fetch lands and then these shock lands. Anyway, so the Castle Lothwain might come in untapped, then it taps for 1 black mana. Later on, when you don't need any more lands, you can pay 3 mana in total, tap it to draw a card. Then you get damage for the number of cards you have in your hand. So obviously you're doing this when you've got 1 or 2 cards in hand, it'll damage you very little. Even if you need to do it when you've got 4 cards in hand, drawing the right cards is still going to be better, so that's a good mana sink to have there. The blue castle, Castle Vantress, also comes into play tapped unless you've got an island. Then it taps for 1 blue. Or later you can pay 4 mana, tap it, and it'll scry 2. So you'll be able to see 2 cards deep into your library to get the better things that you need to wreck your opponent. Lands are pretty simple. 9 islands, 9 swamps. Get any ones you want. I went with the Theros Underworld lands. Alright, next up, let's talk about creatures. This deck has 17 creatures, and they all happen to be nightmare creatures. I love building decks with stipulations that are very tribal, that are very focused. I think that's the purest expression of Magic, not just throwing a mishmash of cards in here that don't have any sort of theme. I really like putting together a Magic deck that has a theme, and I hope you do too. I hope this build helps you on that, to think about Magic in that sort of way. So, starting off with a 1-drop. Banehound, 1 black mana, you get a 1/1. Nightmare Hound. Actually, nowadays, errataed into a Nightmare Dog. Okay, it's got lifelink and haste. So summon it on turn 1, attack right away with 1 damage, and gain 1 life. Right away, your opponent's going to see that they're in for a world of nightmares. If you don't have that one in hand, you could also have the Zagoth Mamba. This is a 1 black mana, 1/1. Whenever this creature mutates, target creature and opponent controls gets -2/-2. So there's a little bit of mutate action happening in this deck. Basically, you attach another creature onto this creature, you mutate onto it, and then you will get to -2/-2 your opponent's creature, like their Mana Dork or other smaller sort of creature. So this comes out on turn 1, and then on later turns mutated into something bigger. Next up, for 2 mana, we've got the Devourer of Memory, 1 blue, 1 black. It's a 2/1. It's just a plain old nightmare. Whenever 1 or more cards are put into your graveyard from your library, Devourer gets +1 until end of turn and cannot be blocked. So whenever you mill yourself for at least 1, this gets bigger and unblockable. You can force a mill by paying 3. Put the top card of your library into your graveyard. So mill something away. Perhaps you scried first to see a land was coming, so then you can pay the 3 to put the land in the graveyard, give this +1. It's a 3/2 unblockable. Swimmer of Nightmares is a 3-mana Nightmare Merfolk. It's a 1/4. This gets +3/+0 as long as there are 10 or more cards in a single graveyard. In anyone's graveyard, as long as there's 10 cards, this is a 4/4 for 3 mana. And then this cannot be blocked as long as you control an Ashiok Planeswalker. Any Ashiok. A lot of times these Planeswalker exclusive decks would only care about the Planeswalker that came in the original deck. This one cares about any Ashiok Planeswalker. So your Brawl and Commander Ashiok, your 5-mana Nightmare Muse Ashiok, or your 6-mana Sculptor of Fear Ashiok. Any Ashiok, this Swimmer of Nightmares becomes a nightmare for your opponent. Grim Dancer, here's another nightmare. It's a 3/3 for 3 mana, 2 of which is black. Grim Dancer enters the battlefield with your choice of 2 different counters from among Menace, Death Touch, or Lifelink. So if you put Menace onto it, it needs to be blocked by at least 2 creatures. If you put Death Touch, it'll kill even the strongest 12/12 creature. And Lifelink gains you back 3 life. I personally love to put Menace and usually Lifelink, sometimes Menace and Death Touch to wipe out one of their big creatures. The Hunted Nightmare is another 3-mana creature. This time it's a 4/5 with Menace, so it's got built-in Menace, and it's a 4/5. What's the catch? When the Nightmare enters the battlefield, target opponent puts a Death Touch counter on a creature they control. So if they have 1 creature and you've got 1 creature, this is unblockable. They do have to put a Death Touch counter on their own creature, but if you manage to wipe out their creatures down to 1 or less, that's not a big deal because you're going to be attacking with a 4/5, unblockable, basically. Underworld Charger, the Nightmare Horse, 3-mana, 3/3. Underworld Charger cannot block. Okay, so it's going to attack, but it cannot block. When it dies, you can bring it back from the Underworld by paying the escape cost. 5 mana and exile 3 cards from your graveyard. It comes back with 2/1/1, so it comes back as a 5/5. This nightmare creature can keep coming back over and over as long as there's dead things in the graveyard to feed it. Next up is the Slither Wisp. I love this little guy. This is a 3/2 for 3. The mana cost is kind of interesting. It's 2 black, 1 blue. It's got Flash. So flash it in on your opponent's turn when they're attacking with their 1/1, thinking that you're no threat. Flash it in, block their 1/1. Or simply flash it in on their turn, so when it's your turn, you are ready to attack with it. What it also does, whenever you cast another spell that has Flash, you draw a card and each opponent loses 1 life. So adding more Flash creatures to this deck will strengthen it a bit more by giving you card draw and then a little life loss for the opponent. So this Elemental Nightmare is just got some beautiful art and is perfect in this deck. Dread Presence, 4 mana for a 3/3. Whenever a swamp enters the battlefield under your control, choose one of these. So this has Landfall or Swamp Fall, meaning as soon as you play a land, you get an automatic trigger off of it, and there's 2 amazing ones. Either you draw a card and lose 1 life, no big deal, so a free card draw simply by playing a swamp. Or, when you play your swamp, it deals 2 damage to any target and you gain 2 life. So 2 damage to that little pesky 2/2 creature your opponent has, 2 damage to that pesky planeswalker, or 2 damage directly to the opponent and you gain 2 life. Insatiable Hemophage, 4 mana, 3/3 nightmare with Death Touch. So again, it'll kill even the strongest Titanomox Rex. Or you can pay 3 mana to mutate it, attach it to a non-human creature. Everything in the deck is non-human, it's all nightmares. So you'll be able to attach it instead. So like I said, bring out that Zagoth Mamba turn 1, and then eventually on turn 3, mutate this onto it. That's going to be a 3/3 Death Touch, etc. Plus that -2. Okay, so even if you don't mutate it, you get a 3/3, but if you mutate it, whenever this creature mutates, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of times this creature mutated. Mutate it once, you gain 1 life, they lose 1 life. You get a big old 3/3 for 3 mana on top of another creature. Mutate more things on top of it, and then you gain more life and they lose more life. Ashiok's Skulker, 5 mana for a 3/5, then pay 4 and it cannot be blocked. So an unblockable 3/5 that can either defend you pretty well with a big butt, that's what we call it when they've got a lot of toughness, and then the power of 3 keeps doing damage over and over as long as you pay that 4 for unblockability. You'll be surprised how fast an opponent tries to take this one out once they see that it's unblockable. Cave Whisperer. This is 5 mana for a 4/4 with Menace, so again, it's gotta be blocked with 2. Or if you mutate it for 4, whenever this creature mutates, each opponent discards a card. So wipe things out right out of their hand as soon as you mutate. Once again, bring out one of your small creatures and then mutate this on top of it. You get a bigger creature with Menace plus the card Hand Disruption. Doom Whisperer, 5 mana, 6/6. I love this one. It's a Nightmare Demon. It's got flying and trample. So even if they got like a little 2/2 flyer in the air, this is going to trample right on through. Then you pay 2 life to Surveil 2. As many times as you want, as much life as you have, you can then Surveil to see what's coming up to the next of your library. This is different than Scry. Scry is if you don't like the card, put it at the bottom of the library. Surveil is if you don't like the card, put it in your graveyard. Once again, you've got an Ashiok that can bring stuff back from the graveyard, so that's not a big deal. What is going to be a big deal is you can pay 2, 4, 6 life, whatever, to get the perfect answer in your next 2 draws. Next up, Ashiok's Forerunner. This honorary nightmare has Flash, so it synergizes with Slitherwisp. You can summon it during your opponent's turn. You've got Slitherwisp out, it draws you a card, they lose a life. Better yet, when you summon the Forerunner here, you get to go search for your Ashiok Sculptor of Fears right into your hand. So do it on your opponent's turn, go grab your Ashiok, it's back to your turn, this is ready to attack, summon your Ashiok, and then that Sculptor of Fears, it's doing its stuff. So I love having this honorary human wizard nightmare in the deck. Dream Eater, Nightmare Sphinx for 6 mana, 4/3 with flash and flying. So once again, Slitherwisp loves this little guy because of that extra card draw and damage. Okay, so this has got a lot of texture. I love this. This is why this is mythic rare. When Dream Eater enters the battlefield, Surveil 4. When you do, you may return target non-land permanent and opponent controls to its owner's hand. So be careful here. If this gets countered, you won't get the second part of it after the Surveil. You have to do the Surveil part, then you do the second part. That shouldn't be a big deal, though. Okay, so it surveils for 4. You can look 4 deep into your library and sculpt it however you want. Keep 2 at the top, put 2 in the graveyard, put him in any order you want, keep all 4, put him in whatever order you want. And then also bounce back something back to the opponent's hand. Their amazing creature, their artifact enchantment, planeswalker, whatever. And then you've got a 4/3 ready to attack in the air. Next, the Chittering Harvester, 6 mana for a 4/6. If you mutate it, however, whenever this creature mutates, each opponent sacrifices a creature. I've used this little guy so well so many times to pick out a few things from the opponent's side when they think they've got a blocker, especially a Death Touch blocker. I mutate this creature onto my other creature, they have to sacrifice that creature, and I come in with a 4/6. And lastly, the Void Beckoner. 8 mana for an 8/8 with Death Touch. So as the game goes long, you will eventually be able to cast this. If you can't, you can cycle it for 3. If you do cycle it, what it does is it draws you another card. You discard it and draw another card, so you weren't able to summon this, so you gotta discard it and get another card. But not only do you get another card off of this, but then you can put a Death Touch counter on a creature you control. So make your 1/1 Death Touch and it'll block any scary thing. If it's in your graveyard, once again, you can use Ashiok Sculptor of Fears to bring it back from the graveyard. Alright, those are the creatures. Let's talk about threat removal. So, first of all, we've got an Agonizing Remorse. Turn 2, look at your opponent's hand, remove whatever you want out of it, to exile, so that it's not a problem later on. Exile their thing that they were about to cast, or exile their thing that in the later will be a problem. You only lose 1 life, so totally worth it. Heartless Act. 2 mana to either destroy a creature with no counters or remove 3 counters from a creature. So this will work most of the time to kill most creatures. There will be some creatures with counters that won't be killable, but you'll weaken them by 3. Hopefully you're removing enough counters to turn it into a 0/0. What about removing a Planeswalker? What about removing 4 Planeswalkers? The Elder Spell is amazing. 2 black mana, destroy any number of Planeswalkers. Now technically yours too if you are not careful, but obviously you will be careful. I've had this spell destroy 2 of my opponent's Planeswalkers that they thought they were gonna beat me with. destroyed completely with 2 black mana. Then you can put up to 2 loyalty counters for each planeswalker destroyed this way on one of your planeswalkers. So if you destroy 2 planeswalkers, you can put 4 loyalty onto yours. If you destroyed their 1 planeswalker, you can put 2 on yours. So that's amazing. Cry of the Carnarium is a 3 mana, give everything -2/-2. So this is a bit of a board wipe for their creatures, especially a bunch of tokens. Wipe out all those tokens, totally exile them as well if anything dies. Be careful, it hurts you as well, so you want to do this first before summoning your smaller creatures. Murder, 3 mana, instantly destroy any target creature, so this is just classic removal for 3 instant. Bake into a Pie is the 4 mana equivalent, but it also gives you a food token, which you can later crack to gain life. Pay 2, tap it, sacrifice it, gain 3 life. Blood Curdle, 4 mana, instantly destroy a creature, and then you put a menace counter on your own creature, so it's a little bit harder to block, and with this 4 mana you can instantly destroy their creature. Price of Fame, another 4 mana, destroy a creature, though it only costs 2 mana for a legendary creature. What legendary creature should I take out of my opponents? Oh yeah, their Brawl and Commander. Their card that they spent so much mana to summon. On your turn, you just pay 2 instead of 4 to destroy it. Then you surveil for 2. So once again, look through 2 cards of your library, of your next draws, to get the best draws next. Ritual of Soot, another board wipe here. 4 mana, sorcery speed, destroy all creatures with CMC of 3 or less. Again, this could also destroy your own creature, so be careful. But once you've got your bigger creatures, you can wipe out most of their creatures, especially if they're smaller, and this will wipe out all tokens, so be careful about yours, but definitely on your opponent. Tokens have a 0 casting cost, a 0 converted mana cost, so this will wipe out all tokens. Alright, that's some removal. Let's look at a little bit of card advantage. Divination, 3 mana to draw 2 cards. So this puts you ahead of 1 card. It replaces itself, draws you 1 card on top of the card it replaces itself. So again, getting more cards versus your opponent will get you ahead of your opponent. And one of the things you need to think about when you do Brawl decks is put some amount of card draw in here, because you're not just going to rely on top decking all the time. You've got to draw more cards than your opponent. So Slitherwisp can do this, and also Dread Presence, and a card like Divination. And a card like Wind Words. Again, it's 3 mana, just like the Divination, but it can cost 1 less if you control a creature with flying, and it draws you 2 cards. Funeral Rites is another 3 mana. This one draws you 2 cards, you lose 2 life, and you mill yourself 2. Again, there's a little bit of graveyard strategies, so that milling of 2 is not so bad, losing 2 life is not so bad, and it draws you 2 cards. And so that's my Ashiok Planeswalker Brawl deck tech. It's got a tribal focus with nightmares. It's got some mill strategy against your opponent, a little self-mill for some action there. A lot of menace and death touch creatures, a few flash creatures, got some good removal here and there, and some card draw. You've got the mana rocks to then ramp faster than your opponent and to be able to summon your own planeswalker over and over. The deck, of course, could be changed in different ways, such as adding more graveyard recursion. You can put a few more cards to get stuff back from your graveyard if you want. Better yet, maybe a card like Bond of Revival to get something directly from the graveyard into the battlefield, or Cauldron's Gift. You can decide if you want to do that. I wouldn't mind also putting in 1 more mana rock for a little bit of acceleration. I personally like 26 lands plus 4 mana rocks. So maybe a Firemind's Vessel if you want, or a Gilded Lotus. You could put more of a heavier mill strategy also if you're a little bit meaner. You can put in there an Overwhelmed Apprentice, Merfolk Secret Keeper, or Drowned Secrets if you really want to be mean against your opponent. Or you can put more of the hand disruption in there. Besides the Agonizing Remorse, you could also put Duress, Spectral Shriek, or Thought Erasure. It's all up to you. This is your nightmare. So let me know what you thought of the deck. How could I improve it? What would you change about it? Have you tried this deck yourself? Tell me how much you've won with it, how much you've struck terror into the hearts of your opponents. I'd love to hear it. Don't forget to check out my Patreon, patreon.com/vmcampos, and follow for free to be alerted to everything that I do regarding Magic, comic books, cosplay, San Diego Comic-Con, and all that good stuff. At the $1 tier, you'll unlock exclusive stuff. At the $2 tier, I'll actually mail you some Magic cards in appreciation. No, not a Black Lotus. In any event, if you can't pledge at the moment, follow, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. This has been VM Campos, and I'll see you in the underworld.